In one sense, it is easy to understand. Light enters and is processed by the eye in a particular way, and the brain interprets this process as the perception of a color, say blue. Yet, in contemporary English-speaking society, we feel blue, listen to jazz blues, and admire Picasso for his blue period, even though no native speaker would expect these instances of blueness to look the same, or to look like anything necessarily. These are the symbolic and cultural aspects of color, and they are slippery. They shift, they change, they surprise us. Yet what we think about color is just as important as what we see. Symbols and cultural associations tell us far more than what our eyes alone can discern. If I say, for example, that someone bought me a red rose, I am not just saying I got a free flower. I am drawing upon the cultural associations that native English speakers have with the color red to indicate that I have been given a romantic gift. Someone likes me, someone loves me even, but you wouldn't know that if you didn't know the cultural baggage that comes with the color red. You'd be colorblind, so to speak, unable to process the full weight of the information being offered. These types of color resonances and associations tend to be unspoken, conveyed through a lifetime of social and literary micro-exposures. And they differ, of course, across languages and cultures. We don't pick up that red conveys love or blood or rage the first time we read the word or see the color. We begin to realize only after the 1,000th exposure or the 100,000th. A native speaker learns the resonances of his or her language by living with and within that language. But what about languages that don't have native speakers anymore? What about books that were written 1,000 years ago by people who spoke and thought in ways that we can now only imagine? In these languages, languages like Old English, which was spoken by the Germanic peoples of early England from about 500 to 1100 AD, we've lost a significant chunk of the meaning that color words might have conveyed. Even when we know what a color looked like, we don't really know what it means. We are, in approaching Old English literature, constantly half colorblind. And that is where my research comes in. This summer, I have developed a methodology that aims to reconstruct the cultural color resonances embedded within the body of Old English literature. My research essentially asks what the Anglo-Saxons thought about color, rather than what they saw. To answer this question, I used the online dictionary of Old English corpus, which is a searchable archive of every extant Old English text, to create a color word database. I recorded every occurrence of rayod and fealo, the two words chosen for my preliminary study, along with the context and, along with the context in the reference, that is, the thing being described as a particular color. I then used searchable categories to track major patterns of association between colors and the things they described, and then used the numbers I came up with to develop a set of initial hypotheses. I finally turned to a variety of additional material, which I've listed on the slide you see here, to test and support my findings. Today I'm going to show you two examples of the results produced by these methods. First, I'd like to look at the Old English term fealo. This is the root of the modern English fallow, as in a fallow field, and generally denotes a sort of yellowish, goldish, gray color, like wheat or a weathered pine board. The data you see here shows that fealo displays two major patterns of use. First, it is most common in poetry. Second, outside of poetry, it tends to describe one thing, vegetation, or plants. When we look more closely at vegetation as a category, however, we can see that fealo doesn't just describe plants. It specifically describes the color shift of plants in the process of dying, from turn from green to yellow or brown. This association is consistent with fealo's Proto-Indo-European root pel, which describes a change in state, a brightening or darkening. It also lines up with etymological cognates in Middle and Early New High German, and with the sense of fading or draining retained in Middle English value, which sometimes describes human faces and feelings, in addition to fields, as being drained of color or vitality. Taken as a whole, the evidence suggests that the sense of paleness, fading, and decline found in other Germanic cognates was also present in the Anglo-Saxon understanding of fealo. A primary definition of phthalo, then, as the color of dead or dying plant matter, allows us to consider the term's poetic contexts through a newly focused lens. While many of the objects described by phthalo in Old English poetry seem wildly different from one another in appearance, including swords, the ocean, horses, and bird feet, many of these things are in fact linked by a sense of decline or decay in the poem in which they appear. A good example of this can be found in the Old English poem, The Battle of Malden. In the passage you see here, the sword of the nobleman Beardknot is generally translated as golden hilted or yellow hilted, because in modern English there is no such thing as a fallow-colored metal. Our new understanding of phthalo, however, allows us to read the original Old English text in a more complex way. Beardknot is dying. He has been too deeply pierced by the enemy's spear and draws his sword as a last-ditch defense. When it falls as a leaf or blossom would fall from a dying tree. The phthalo-hilted sword foreshadows Beardknot's own demise. This association would be completely lost if the word gold or geolo, yellow, were substituted for the color phthalo. And understanding this allows us to grasp more fully the emotional impact of the passage as a whole. Phthalo then may be more popular in poetry because it carries this bittersweet sense of loss, decline, and decay, which might be inappropriate in a less dramatic context. Its primary use to describe dead plant matter has been creatively expanded within the poetic genre. Another example of the ways in which a cultural context can enhance our understanding of color words can be found in the Old English phrase, rayod gold. Scholars have puzzled over this term for more than a century. Clearly gold metal isn't red, and yet for the Anglo-Saxons, it was. How can this be? Well, I suspect that part of the problem is that we have been asking the wrong question. Previous studies operated upon the assumption that that rayod was a universal feature of gold in Anglo-Saxon England, and then attempted to explain this. But my analysis shows that in fact, that gold is described as rayod only 24 times out of more than 1,000, making rayod gold the exception rather than the rule. Given that this is the case, our investigation must begin with a different question. We must ask not why is gold rayod, but when is gold rayod, and to what purpose? My methods offer a fairly convincing answer to this new question. I estimate conservatively that 76% of the man-made items described by rayod and its compounds refer to association between red material goods and wealth. Red cloth fragments, for example, are sometimes found buried with Scandinavian nobility, but not in the graves of the poor and middle class. Anglo-Saxon religious writers also use the modifier reddest to describe objects being simply coveted by men on earth. Gems, gold, and clothing are consistently listed together in these passages, strengthening their ties to one another as a group of luxury goods. It would seem that in this context, the reddest incarnation of an object, like the brightest or the most precious, is considered the most valuable, and thus the most tempting. So if red gems and red cloth describe the best gems and cloth, it would seem that red gold would describe the best or highest quality gold. This inference is supported by Old English glosses or translations of Latin texts. The Latin term aurum obrisum, or fine gold, is consistently translated into two Old English phrases, smacta gold, or refined gold, and rayod gold. It seems that in this context, rayod likely indicates quality rather than hue, as neither smacta nor obrisum indicate a particular color. In essence, my research suggests that rayod, in the context of man-made goods, functions as an indicator of luxury, as well as, or instead of, color. And so rayod gold is a particularly fine version of an already valuable material, sort of like a Rolex watch, or a Tiffany engagement ring. It's the best of the best. So when we read Old English literature and we see the phrase rayod gold, we should consider what it might mean for the object in question to be the best of the best, and how that changes or reinforces our understanding of the story. It's worth saying, I think, that both of the color associations I have shared with you today are not what I thought I would find when I began this project. And I'm sure there will be more surprises to come. But that, in a way, is the point. My research is designed to let Old English literature speak for itself. It is designed to separate what the Anglo-Saxons thought about color from what we think today. The philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein, in his remarks on color, says rather beautifully that in every serious inquiry, we should always be prepared to learn something totally new. And I hope that my research demonstrates the truth of this. But there is always something to be learned, even from texts that are more than 1,000 years old. And that in rediscovering the thoughts and beliefs of the Anglo-Saxons, we are better able to understand our own. Thank you.
Is the word rea related to the Latin or Spanish rey or king at all?
I don't believe so. I mean, it's definitely related to the modern English red, but
Okay.
I'm not aware of its relationship to the word for king in any other language.
The modern English fallow denotes something that is at rest. A fallow field, you'd let it rest until you're ready to plant it again. Is there any element of that in the Anglo-Saxon semiotics, or of it being something that would come back, or come back to life?
Oh, so it's sort of a cyclical sense of
Yes.
renewal. I'm going to say that that's probably not the case based on the passages that I've been able to analyze, and based on the passages that we have left, I guess, in essence. Most of the instances in which fallow refers to a growing or living thing, it refers to it specifically in the act of fading and dying. Although there is one passage actually in which a phoenix is described as fallow, or the fire that consumes the phoenix is described as fallow, and since the phoenix is a creature that engages in an act of rebirth, it's possible that that association is inherent in that passage, but I don't have other passages to sort of compare that to, so I can't say for sure.
I know that some types of gold can be like alloyed or contain impurities that will give them like a reddish hue. Do you think that that could be part of where this association between redness and gold could come from?
Well, there's actually been about 7 different theories proposed for why the Anglo-Saxons describe gold as red, and one of those theories is that they were particularly fond of an alloyed form of gold. But archaeological evidence doesn't really support this possibility. The golden artifacts that we've recovered from Anglo-Saxon England are not generally an alloyed reddish gold or like a rose gold color. And additionally, usually rayod gold refers to like a very fine or refined form of gold, and the refining process, like the physical refining process, would tend to remove the kind of impurities that would have caused gold to be that color in the